You know what? I feel like I've seen this movie before. Oh, yeah. What's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by. Got another review for you tonight, this time for Fox's last entry in the X-Men franchise, Dark Phoenix. I have so much to share about this movie. But before I get started, I'd like to hear from you guys. Tell me in the comments below, what did you think about this movie? Whether you loved it or whether you hated it. I love to hear about it. And don't forget to click on that subscribe button, to click on that bell notification to hear any more content from me for your future enjoyment. This is the 12th and final X-Men film in Fox's franchise. It is directed by Simon Kinberg in its directorial debut, starring the same cast as you've seen in Apocalypse, along with Jessica Chastain as the main antagonist. In this version of Dark Phoenix, the X-Men must face the full power of the Phoenix after a mission goes wrong in space. During this mission, Jean inherits this cosmic force that develops her powers even more so than it already is. Now the X-Men will have to decide if the life of a team member is worth more than all the people living in the world. So as most of you know, about 13 years ago we had X-Men The Last Stand. One that was disappointing to me because with that one, they ruined the Dark Phoenix storyline. Not only did they ruin it, but they combined it with another comic book storyline from the X-Men about the Cure. And I was just so disappointed about this movie. And it's one of the most well-known comic book stories of all comic books. Even if you're not a big comic book reader, you're probably aware of the Dark Phoenix. And when I heard they were making another version of the Dark Phoenix I think about a year and a half ago, I was excited and I thought, finally, they're gonna do it right. Well, here we are. I'm going to try to be as positive as I can be about this review. That's what my channel's all about, even though there's so much I'm disappointed about this movie, but I'm going to try. To start out with the good. First off, the cast. You have the same cast as you've seen in Apocalypse. Everyone hit it off in their roles as usual. Professor X and Magneto, played by Michael Fassbender, and James McAvoy, as usual, do a fantastic job. The X-Men as a whole, though, I felt some more prominent than others. I feel like characters like Nightcrawler, Storm, maybe even Cyclops, they weren't as shown as much. They were kind of in the background more so than the others. This is Dark Phoenix, so it's mostly about Jean Grey. Yes, she is the star of this movie. Sophie Turner, she did a pretty good job as Jean Grey. She wasn't shown as much in Apocalypse. She was actually one of the background type of characters, maybe a supporting role versus everyone else in that movie. Here, she's up at the front, taking the role of the Dark Phoenix. And since we're talking about the cast, I'm just going to talk about one of the things I didn't like about this movie, and that was Jessica Chastain. She is a great actress. I do like her in many movies, but her role in this movie was absolutely awful. I don't know what it was, but I didn't like it. I am a big fan of the X-Men, I already said that, and of the Dark Phoenix saga. I'll get into more of the storyline in a second, but when it comes to this villain, I'm not going to say who it is, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. They reveal who it is, but if you're an X-Men fan or a comic book fan, you're going to know who these people are, and they're somewhat involved in the Phoenix saga in the comic books, but in no way are they this involved. And not only that, just the way they're executed in this movie is just so horrible. It's probably the worst villains I've ever seen in the entire X-Men franchise. I don't know about the entire comic book movies as a whole, but at least in this franchise, it is the worst villain I've ever seen. I did not feel threatened by this villain. Her lines were horrible, and even though she did a good acting job, it was not convincing, and I just wish they would have used the villains that we would have seen in the actual comic book version of the Phoenix saga. Now, pushing aside the cast, the other thing I did like about this movie was the score. This is probably one of the best scores I've heard throughout the entire X-Men franchise. And I know we have John Ottoman's famous X-Men theme that you've heard throughout some of the other movies like Apocalypse and X2, that's where it first got started. And that would probably be the most remembered one. But this one, Hans Zimmer, did the score for this. It was so emotional, so dark, very Hans Zimmer. If you know his music, he's done Pirates of the Caribbean. He's done a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, the Dark Knight trilogy. He just has the way of creating music that creates such emotion. He is like, in my opinion, the John Williams of our time. I don't know if anyone will disagree with me or not about that, but he is a fantastic composer. And when I heard he was doing the music for this movie, I could not wait to hear the soundtrack. And I did hear a little bit before I saw the movie, and just watching the movie, it was just, I was in awe just because of this music, but he did bring a sense of emotion with his style, and I have to say I'm glad that at least he was able to be a part of this. When it comes to particular moments in this movie that stood out for me, my favorite part, I have to say, was the first quarter of this film. This is the part that I felt was the closest to the source material of the Phoenix Saga. As you all probably know when you've seen the trailer, the X-Men are on a mission to space to save some astronauts. If you know the comic books, that's exactly how Jean inherited her power. If you've seen Phoenix in the X-Men animated series, the same thing happens when she saves the astronauts and she gets hit by this cosmic force and becomes the Phoenix. That was exactly what I envisioned, and I saw that in the movie theater. That particular moment, I thought, this is amazing. This part was good. This is where I was like, all right, this might be going somewhere. And from there on out, it kind of went downhill. And that leads me to the bad. First off, it's not the story that it should have been. There have been so many reshoots, so many release dates changed around from this movie. It just kept me thinking, okay, is this gonna be good or is this gonna be really bad? Because they had to change the ending for this movie. And from what we were told, there was supposed to be this grand, epic space battle at the end. No, that doesn't happen in this movie. What starts off as a promising version of the Dark Phoenix, they combined other elements throughout the Dark Phoenix saga that they tried to make it their own, and plus creating a different villain to come into this storyline that should have been somebody else. And I just think they ruined it entirely. And I know they're trying to make their own version. The director and the makers of this film even said they're trying to make a more realistic version, a more grounded version of the Phoenix Saga. How can you do that? It's a story about a cosmic force and mutants and aliens. I mean, how is that realistic? They could have just added the whole space story and it could have been a fantastic story. The MCU did it. Look how they're doing with their cosmic stories and their journeys into space. They could have done it with this movie and it would have been fantastic. They missed a perfect opportunity. Next, another thing I did not like was the locations used in this film. It felt so anticlimactic, but it made it feel even worse to the fact that their locations felt so minimal. They felt so simple. I was kind of surprised to see that in a movie as big as this, because being that Dark Phoenix is such a powerful story, you would have thought it would have been their most epic movie out of all 12 of them. And when you compare it to movies like X2, Days of the Future Past, even Apocalypse, which wasn't even that great, these movies had epic sequences that will surpass this movie. And this film really only has 4 locations that were used, and that was obviously the X-Mansion. You have Genosha, where it's Magneto protecting these other mutants. You have this building in New York, and that's where some of the action is. Then you have this train sequence at the end, which makes up the climax of the movie, and that was where the space battle was supposed to be. Though there was a lot of action, you saw X-Men using their powers, it was cool. It just felt very anticlimactic, and for a movie to end that way, I was wanting more. It felt very, very unsatisfying to me. And aside from the space mission, that scene there, which was none of those locations, that was the most epic part of the entire movie for me personally. The special effects too, I was kind of in the middle about this one. Some parts look pretty good, some parts not so good. It's not X-Men Wolverine Origins bad. It's kind of a bit above that, but it's not as good as like Days of the Future Past special effects. I don't know. I was hoping for a little bit more in the special effects department. It was good for the most part, but I don't know. I'm kind of iffy on it, but they did what they could, and it was all right. But with all that put aside, I think you all know the grade I'm going to give it. 6 out of 10. This is just a movie I was hoping for the best, and I did not get that. What made it work or made it worthwhile for me was the score, the acting, and some of the action. Otherwise, this is not the Dark Phoenix saga. This is not what I was hoping for, and hopefully third time's a charm. And when Disney finally makes their version of the X-Men, whenever that may be, hopefully it's something we've all been wanting for the last few years. But tell me in the comments below, what did you think about this movie? If you hated it, or if you loved it, I still like to hear it. I like to hear your opinions. Why did you love it? That's the beauty of opinions. Let's start a conversation going. But as usual, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more movie reviews and TV reviews from me. Y'all have a great night. This is Ryan the Movie Guy saying, I'll see you at the movies.